and to encourage our rights. And the idea that Islam in America is new is just simply not true. Muslims have been in North America even before America was created. So along with Islamophobes, I think even amongst some Muslims also sort of have this idea that sort of, again, Islam is here and it doesn't really interact with the rest of American history. They have this idea that Islam is like in this black box and the trends in America don't really impact Islam. And you sort of see this playing out when I think Muslims don't engage with the process. They don't vote here, they don't pay attention to the news, and they say, no, it's fine, I don't need to pay attention to that. And I think my family, some members of my family sort of, I think follow that example. Where I have some members of my family, we're Pakistani, and they watch Pakistani news all the time. They're American citizens, their kids go to school here, they pay taxes here, but if you talk to them about what's going on in the news, if you talk to them about voting, they don't pay attention. They don't care. And I think it's really because of the fact that they don't see themselves to some degree as a part of America. And I think that as Muslims, right, our history is still being written. And so if we want to write the next chapter of American Muslim history, and we can talk about what that looks like, but if we want to write the next chapter of American Muslim history, we have to, number one, beat back this idea that Islam is sort of separate from America. And we have to encourage all of our Muslim brothers and sisters to see themselves as a part of American history so we can get involved and write the next chapter of American Muslim history, inshallah. So let's get started. At the very beginning, the first Muslims to arrive in large numbers to America came as slaves. They made up roughly 20,000 of the 400,000 slaves that were initially brought to North America from Africa. Now, unfortunately, not much is known about these Muslim slaves. The only ones that we really know about were really the ones that were deemed in the minds of white people exceptional. And what I mean by that is there would sort of be moments where, in the case of this brother, Ayuba Suleiman Diallo, who actually wrote a letter in Arabic to his father when he was enslaved, and that letter was then intercepted by a white person in America who then freed him. And so then Diallo went on to live a very, I would say, well-established life. He traveled, he debated with intellectuals, but he is the exception. Because obviously not all Muslim slaves basically impressed white people in America. And so we were going to show this video. This video is really great. I encourage everyone to look it up. You can just type in The Fortunate Slave or Ayuba Suleiman Diallo, and this video will come up. It's only 4 minutes, but it really talks about the challenges also that he faced. Because many slaves then, they would also de-Islamify themselves. Now, as the name suggests, the slaves here would basically, when they came here, if they wanted to practice Islam, they had to practice it in secret. They would go pray in the woods, or they would basically convert, or at least fake conversion, to please their masters so they wouldn't get beat. However, on the inside, they were still Muslim. But they, again, did this out of self-preservation because, obviously, they basically did not want to get beat further by their slave owners. And so eventually, as time goes on, it becomes time to found the country. Now, I don't know if anyone remembers this, but back in 2015, Ben Carson made a comment when he was running for president. He said, I don't think a Muslim should be president, or I don't think that I can trust a Muslim to be president. Does anyone remember this? And it's just so sad because, obviously, number one, that is a very bigoted thing to say, but I think it also shows a lack of understanding of American history. Because when they were thinking about the Constitution, the Founding Fathers actually discussed the idea of a Muslim president. They discussed it at the 1788 Constitutional Ratification Debate in North Carolina. And Muslims were mentioned 5 times when they were discussing freedom of religion. And they brought up the idea of a Muslim president 3 times. They discussed, can a Muslim be president of the United States? And they decided, yes, we can have a Muslim president. I just think it's so remarkable to think of these, basically just white guys from hundreds of years ago who probably had never even met a Muslim. And if they had met a Muslim, it was probably because they owned one as a slave, debating the idea of a Muslim president. And again, they decided, yes, we can have a Muslim president. And Thomas Jefferson, obviously one of the most famous founding fathers, even owned a Quran. And he himself said, yes, religious freedom applies to everyone, even Muslims. So next time someone tells you, we can't have a Muslim president, or, I don't trust a Muslim, to be, in this high position of power, you can say, well, you should, because it's been debated in American history, and the founding fathers themselves discussed it and agreed, yes, we can even have a Muslim president. Now, with the second generation of slaves, Islam is basically erased from America. Because like I mentioned, the first generation of slaves, they would de-Islamify themselves. They would basically have to convert because that's what their owners told them to do. And then when they had kids, they didn't raise their kids Muslim. So you basically have Islam sort of wiped away from America for that period in time. And it doesn't really come back until the late 1800s, the early 1900s, where we have the first major waves of Muslim migration. And so the vast majority of people who came from the Muslim majority world came from the Levant. And many of those people, especially the Muslims, came as sort of what we would call today low-skilled laborers. So they came as people who work in factories, as manual laborers, and so they did that kind of work, and they would settle wherever work was available. And so they actually chose to go to really the industrial areas in America. So many of them went to Detroit. And as we know today, Dearborn, Michigan, has the largest population of Arabs in the United States, and this is one of the reasons why, because the earliest immigrants from the Muslim world went to Detroit to work in the auto factories. And many Bosnians actually went to Chicago to help dig the subway. So you literally had Muslims who helped to really build a lot of the infrastructure that these cities thrive on, the ones that their citizens use every day. Again, this is just another example where sort of for someone to say, Muslims don't belong here, or Islam is some foreign ideology, Muslims literally helped to build this country. But again, they did face their challenges. So as I talked about again with the de-Islamification, here's this quote from this one Muslim immigrant where he talks about really his own decision to change his name. He says, "My true name is Muhammad Asa Abu Hawa, but people I met on the boat told me I'd better change my name. They said it labeled me as a Muslim and no immigration officer would allow a Muslim to enter the United States. I had two cousins who'd become American citizens. One had taken the name of Abraham and the other Joseph, so I took both those names. And since the British pronounced Hawa as if it were Howard, I made my American name A. Joseph Howard. That's how I was naturalized in 1908. So even back then, now obviously we have the issue of the Muslim ban in the news, but even back then they faced those exact same challenges to an even larger degree. Now around this time, you also have this idea of sort of, in America at least, that many Americans, especially people in power, thought that America was exceptional because they were white and because they were Protestant. And so therefore they thought that they were special. And we see this today even, especially when we hear about what the white supremacists are believing, what they share on social media. With them, they basically take out Protestant and they put Christian. So again, this idea of sort of white Christians, of America being a white Christian nation, this idea has been around forever. And we saw this play out in the struggle for citizenship. So we just heard in that quote, right, that brother changed his name so he could secure his citizenship. And so really citizenship has been a struggle for a while. In 1790, white people were citizens. In 1870, they made African American citizens. But citizenship, when it came to people from India, from the Levant, people who were from Turkey, which I guess depending on sort of where you are in history was the Ottoman Empire, that was undefined. And so these people, they then launched challenges, and so they would sue for their citizenship. And so they would make this kind of argument that they were a part of this. They basically had to prove their whiteness to be included in this idea. And so here you see it in a 1915 court ruling. The court said that Levantine Arabs are considered free white persons, making them eligible for citizenship because they belong to the Semitic branch of the Caucasian race, thus widely differing them from their rulers, the Turks, who were in origin Mongolian. So it's just pretty disturbing to think that you have these people claiming that they're Aryan in some cases, claiming that they're white. just to basically secure the basic right to become a U.S. citizen. And so while that worked for the Levantine Arabs, you'd have many other people from other parts of the Muslim world who they'd make that same argument, and the court would say no, simply because of the fact that they don't look white. We also saw this in immigration. They literally passed laws saying that America could only accept 100 people per year from certain Muslim majority countries, compared to Germany, which was at 51,000. That was in the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1924. That's how aggressively they tried to keep out many immigrants and many people of color, especially Muslims as well. And so then eventually we get to World War I. So again, at this point, Islam in the African-American community is in large part non-existent. And so then you have World War I. And World War I is important because it, in a sense, makes people question again this idea that America is exceptional because they are white and they're Protestant. Because you have many African-American leaders and just people in color in general saying to themselves, if America is so exceptional, if white Protestants are so exceptional, why did you all just spend 4 years tearing each other apart in World War I? The war that became known as the war to end all wars. Obviously, since then, unfortunately, we have had many more wars, but that was how devastating it was. So you have that on one hand. And as a result, because the war is going on, you have the Great Migration, which is basically when African Americans from the South travel up north to go take up the jobs that became available due to the war, because America started producing a lot more. So African Americans then go up to the north to work in factories and really in the industrial sites in the north. And so with sort of greater social freedom, with greater economic freedom, you have a lot of spiritual and black nationalist movements emerge. And there's one book written in 1870 which really made people associate black nationalism with Islam. This author wrote a book in 1870 basically sort of telling his experiences. He said that he visited different African communities. He visited African communities that were Christian and African communities that were Muslim. And according to this author, the African communities that were Muslim were just far and beyond much more advanced, much more progressive, and just much more orderly than the communities that were Christian. And so then in this brother's mind, he made the argument that Islam was the true religion of basically Africans, and then by association, African Americans. So you have this idea out there. And at this time around, at the end of the early 1900s, you have black nationalists emerge. Black nationalists made the case that people should be proud to be black and they should invest in their own communities. They should work together to lift themselves up. And you have this brother, Marcus Garvey. He is one of the most famous black nationalists, basically, in American history. And he's the first one. And so he says people should be proud to be black. You should open up your own businesses. You should create your own newspapers. And so you have thinkers like Marcus Garvey. You have these ideas that, again, Islam is the true religion of African Americans. Sort of when you mix these things together, you have sort of Muslim movements begin to emerge. And really the major one, at least in that period, in sort of the 1920s, 1930s, is the Nation of Islam, which comes about in 1936 from Wallace Fard Muhammad. And so again, he really sort of sparks a lot of, I would say, interest among African Americans in Islam. Now, once we get to World War II, sort of this idea, right, that white Protestants are exceptional and therefore they are special, that begins to erode. And so you have this new idea form that America is special not because of a race or because of a religion, but because they like freedom, because they adhere to democratic values. Now, as we know, this is very hypocritical because America has denied freedom and has denied basic freedoms and liberties to people for literally hundreds of years. But that was what they said to the world. And so you had Muslims at this time who had fought in World War II who said, fine, if America believes these things, we want to be included in that. Include us in this idea of liberty, of freedom. And so you have brothers like Abdullah Igram, who was a World War II veteran. He fought in World War II, And when he came back, again, he sort of sought to be included in that, and so he started organizing, and he created the Federation of Islamic the Federation of Islamic Associations of the U.S. and Canada in the 1950s. Now, although they only did one event a year, it's significant because it's really the first time that Muslims really began to organize on a nationwide level. What's also interesting is that he actually convinced the United States to put a designation on a dog tag, basically saying that someone was Muslim. So, for example, dog tags exist. Basically, they have information about different people in the military. They have the name, they have basic information, including what religion the person was. And at the time, there was no connotation for Muslims in the military. And so he fought in World War II, and afterwards, this bothered him naturally. And so he wrote a letter to the president, which is Eisenhower, and he said, you should make a designation on the dog tag indicating that someone is Muslim, because obviously for burials. And eventually Eisenhower agreed, and so that's how we got on the dog tag an I for Islam. But again, this is done by a World War II veteran. Again, and I've said this before, I'll say it again. Muslims have helped build this country. Muslims have fought for this country. And so again, next time someone tells you that Muslims don't belong or Muslims aren't American enough, you should tell them this. Now, that's obviously the immigrant Muslim experience. But the African Muslim experience is different for obvious reasons, given that they suffered a great deal of racial terror, mainly because, obviously, of how they looked. And so while sort of immigrant Muslims were trying to be included in this idea of freedom and liberty, you had many African American Muslims still really focused in on sort of black nationalism and on lifting up their own communities. And so there's a documentary in 1959 which really showed off the Nation of Islam to everyone. By this point, Malcolm X was their spokesperson, and when this documentary showed, it was a little sensational. And so you had people that were just terrified. People were so scared because they thought that now, the black Muslims were here, and they're going to be doing all these bad things. But that wasn't the case at all, because the nation, what they preached, it was more of a shield. They wanted to protect themselves. They wanted to empower themselves. It was black nationalism, and it wasn't anything offensive. It was much more defensive, encouraging them to invest in their own businesses, to build in their own businesses, to live sober lifestyles, and that message resonated with people. Now, obviously, the Nation of Islam, the type of Islam that they followed, is different than mainstream Islam. And so you did have a mainstream Islamic movement called the Dar al-Islam movement, which came about in the 60s. Which was similar to the Nation of Islam in terms of black empowerment, but it was much more focused on mainstream principles. Now, with the Cold War, Islam actually played a very interesting role in America trying to fight back against communism or the Soviet Union. So, for anyone who doesn't know, in order for someone to be communist, they have to be atheist. Because communists believe that if you follow a religion, then basically you can be tricked by the government. They believe that religion is a tool used by the ruling class to basically oppress people. And so they're atheists. And so the U.S. government basically sought to better their relationships with the Muslim world to help fight back against the Soviets. And this obviously led to meddling and supporting certain Muslim factions in certain countries that would help benefit U.S. interests. And this is a picture of actually Eisenhower speaking at the Islamic Center of Washington, D.C. in 1957. This center is very important. It's very significant because the way it's constructed, it takes architectural styles from across the Muslim world. And they do that because the U.S. government did that to send a message that they want to work with the entire Muslim world together to help, at that point, fight back against communism. And really also in that mosque, because it's in D.C., you have diplomats from all over the Muslim world, from Saudi Arabia, from Egypt, from Pakistan, from all over the Muslim world, going to that mosque even today and praying. And so that mosque would serve as kind of a megaphone to the Muslim world. In 1965, if you all remember the quotas, in 1965 they then get rid of the quotas and they basically open up immigration to everyone across the Muslim world. And they will really across just the entire world, but for our case, this really helped to increase the population of Muslims in America. And it was initially created to allow Southern and Eastern European migrants, but the majority of them came from Latin America and Asia. And so you had the population of Muslims increase a great deal with the Immigration and Nationality Act. And so really when we think about America becoming a majority-minority country by, I think it's by 2040 or 2050, it's because of this law. If this law was not passed, I doubt, I'm pretty sure that America would remain a majority white country for decades to come. But because of this country, it fundamentally changed how America looks. And so with a lot of these Muslims coming over, you have the founding of Muslim organizations and Muslim institutions. You have the MSA in the 60s, and then out of that forms ISNA in the 80s. You have the number of mosques really increase in the 1970s. The number of mosques established in 1970 is 5 times greater, was 5 times greater than the number of mosques that were established in the 50s or the 60s. And so really now you have Muslims, because there's more Muslims, number one, and because a lot of the barriers of discrimination are removed. You have them organized, you have them come together. Then in the 1960s is when you really get, I would say, the Islamophobia that I think many of us recognize today. And this came because of the Arab-Israeli conflict, because of the oil crisis, and because of the Iranian hostage crisis. And really, because of this, you have certain Arab groups especially start to organize. And so they create organizations to fight back against the profiling and to lobby for issues that were important to them. And this is also important because the FBI starts doing surveillance on Muslims as early as the 1960s. So as we know, our community is harassed by federal law enforcement for doing, nothing nefarious, obviously. They'll, for example, think that a Muslim can be a threat just because they like to listen to Quran or because they're religious. But it's just sort of interesting to think that since the 1960s, they've been monitoring American Muslims. And with the 90s, you have even more Islamophobia, because in the 1990s, you have the Gulf War in 1990, and then you have the first World Trade Center bombing in 1993. And it was so bad that CARE, which was created in 1994, published a report in 1995 reporting 200 Islamophobic incidents following the Oklahoma Trade Center bombing that year. 200 Islamophobic incidents just in the days following that bombing. And so from that, I think we see the activism that emerged today. So CARE was made in 1994 to be a civil rights organization. And you had a lot of leaders saying this is a time for Muslims to conduct interfaith work. They need to go out. They need to engage with their communities. And so I think the Noor Community Clinic is sort of the perfect example of that. I don't know when it was founded, but when the leaders stressed Muslims getting involved, something like the Noor Community Clinic is exactly what they had in mind, because there's a chance for Muslims to put their Islamic values into action and for them to go out and meet people to help sort of fight bigotry in a much more sort of interpersonal way. Now, obviously, we are all familiar with the challenges faced after 9/11, increased surveillance and NCERS. So I don't know if anyone remembers, but during the 2016 election, there was a little bit of talk about a Muslim registry. And many people don't know, but America kind of already has had a Muslim registry in the past. So it was created in 2002, and it required certain foreign nationals and citizens to basically report to the government to conduct fingerprinting, interviews, check-ins, so on and so forth. And on these sort of on this list of foreign nationals, they had 25 countries, but 24 of them were Muslim majority, with the 25th being North Korea. And in this system, they had 80,000 people. They had 80,000 people in the system, and it led to 13,000 being deported. And so that's just kind of scary to think that this is just, not even 2 decades back, and this infrastructure was there for the government to basically track tens and thousands of Muslims. Now, also after 9/11, you get the emergence of the Islamophobia network. Brothers and sisters, this is a network which exists for no other reason than to demonize Muslims, than to make Muslims look bad. And what they do is they put out anti-Muslim propaganda. They work in state legislatures to pass laws. They exist just to simply demonize us. And it's worth $1.5 billion. And to really give you an example of what they do, they actually will put out reports urging public education institutions, urging teachers to either A, not teach about Islam, or if they do teach about Islam, to basically talk about how it is a violent religion. And so there are cases, I remember once, for example, seeing that this woman's daughter, she was in a calligraphy class, and so they were learning Arabic. And the woman got sort of so angry that, it made news, and again, they looked at it like just like some cultural jihad or something ridiculous. But again, that's the type of fear that the Islamophobia network is pushing. And they also introduced these bills called these anti-Sharia bills. These bills are actually not real laws. They just passed these bills to demonize Muslims. And you had 200 of these bills introduced between 2010 and 2017. And only 14 of them were enacted. But even in the cases where they weren't enacted, they still caused severe damage to American Muslims in those communities, because people start thinking, wait, so my state senator, my state rep, they think Muslims are now trying to take over the country? Is that what's going on? And so it just stirs up a lot of anti-Muslim fears. And so that's basically where we are today. Now, I just want to clarify that this is not all inclusive, because this is a huge topic. I just try to include things that people are that maybe is not talked about as much when we talk about the history of Muslims in America. And I also wanted to cover, I think, the high points that sort of cover certain themes when it comes to the history of Muslims in America. And so when we talk about writing the next chapter of American Muslim history, I think it's pretty clear that this is a unique time to be Muslim in America, right? We have an Islamophobia network that's worth $1.5 billion. Muslims have basically tried to be banned from this country 3 different times, right? The challenges we face are incredibly unique. And so I think people will write about this time. They'll ask, they will study, what did Muslims do in this time? I think people are going to refer to this time like they look at the 60s. And I don't know about you, but I want them to say that Muslims at this time were not afraid. Muslims at this time, instead of retreating from sort of the public sphere, doubled down and engaged and did what they could to not only protect their own rights, but to protect the rights of all people that are being oppressed in America. And so then the question becomes, how do we do that? And we do that by wielding power. And by wielding power, I mean by engaging with the political system. Now, we're nonpartisan, so you can vote however you want. You can do whatever you want, but I think it's important to engage. And you do that by, number one, voting. Brothers and sisters, you have this right, especially here in Ohio. You have this right to vote. And in Ohio, there's a presidential election coming up. There's going to be billions and millions of dollars spent trying to secure your vote. And so you have tremendous power. And so I encourage you to use that to put people in office who are going to protect the rights of American Muslims. The second thing you can do is, after you vote for people, is that you go and you meet with them and you hold them accountable. And so this picture on the bottom is actually from CARE's National Lobby Day from a few years back, where we met with Congressman Tim Ryan, who is a congressman that represents Northeast Ohio up by Youngstown. And so again, we meet with them to, again, put our Islamic values into action and to tell them what we care about and to also tell our stories. Because a lot of these people, especially when we get down to the state level, I'm pretty sure a lot of them have never even met Muslims. And so it's important that we go there, that we show up, and that we, be included. And look, we have had some victories, right? I do think that people can get cynical. People can, become sad and tired. But look, for the first time in American history, we have 2 American Muslim congresswomen. We have the first Muslim that's been elected to a statewide office. And we also have the first Muslim, his name is Faz Shakir, who is the first American Muslim campaign manager for a major presidential campaign. So Muslims are doing well. We are getting better, but we need to keep at it. And so I encourage you all to do that. So today is actually National Muslim Voter Registration Day. So brothers and sisters, we have someone in the back there. Her name is Sister Fadila, and she is registering voters. Today's National Muslim Voter Registration Day. Please, if you're not registered to vote, go ahead and vote. Obviously, we have the presidential elections in 2020, but there's also an election coming up this November. If you've moved since you last voted, yes, you have to re-register. So that's, again, number one, voting. The second thing is engaging those elected officials. Roman, can you start passing them on? So the second thing is engaging those elected officials. And CARE Ohio is actually organizing an event just for this purpose. On September 17th, American Muslims from across the state will be going to the Ohio State House to spend a day talking to state senators and state reps. Roman's actually passing out little postcards with more information about it. The event goes from 8:30 to 3:30, and we'll have Sister Linda Sarsour doing the keynote. And again, this event is important for two reasons. Number one, this is at the state level. You have Muslims, and well, really just many voters who only pay attention to what's going on at the federal level, right? They pay attention to what's going on at CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, really these big news channels. But the laws that impact us most are made really at the state and local levels. And so again, if we want to wield our power, if we want to be in a position where we can write the next chapter of American Muslim history and write it well and be in a position to influence policy, we have to engage strategically. And this is part of that strategy. The second reason is, again, is like these people, I guarantee you, probably very seldom see Muslims advocating. They probably don't really see Muslims at the State House, especially for these people who are from rural districts that are majority white. And so, again, we need to show up and, we need to have our voices heard, and we need to say, we're Muslim, we have rights, and, we demand equality. And so I'll just leave you all with this quote because I think it sort of perfectly sums up, I think, this time in American history. It's by Coretta Scott King, who is the wife of Dr. Martin Luther King. And she says that struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and you win it every generation. And so again, we may feel like now is a particularly crazy time, and it is a crazy time. But now is the time that, again, we double down and we get involved and we do what we can to, not only secure generation for hope, and not only hopefully secure freedom for our own generation, but secure freedom for generations of Muslims to come, inshallah. So, thank you. Are there any questions? I think we have, how much time do we have? 5 minutes? Okay, we have a little 10 minutes. Well, if anyone has any questions. Yep. No, unfortunately you have to be a U.S. citizen to vote. Because what? What are they afraid of? Okay, fine. So they don't, okay, so there's a couple of things. One is the fear. The other is does it make a difference? So let's go with does it make a difference? Everyone here, I think, has donated to something at some point in time, right? You've donated $1, $5, $10. If you have the means, you've donated more. Right? Let's say you're giving just $5. If you are trying to raise money to, let's say, build a masjid or to run some type of charity project, what is $5 going to do on its own? Nothing, right? But it's $5 along with someone else's $5, along with someone's $20, and when you pool all these resources, you can make a lot of great things happen. And that's the thing about voting, right? I mean, even the Prophet said, tie your camel. Why should we count ourselves out when the system exists for us to make a difference? We should, we should tie our camel. Now, in terms of the other thing about fear and people knowing your information, the BMV already has all your information. So by you voting, that's not going to give them any information that they didn't already have. Because when you go to vote, they ask for your ID. Well, the people that give you your ID, they already have your information. Your driver's license, who gives you your driver's license? The BMV gives you your driver's license. So I think that, if they're afraid of voting, well, then they should also be afraid of giving their, just of getting their driver's license. Any other questions? Yep. So I definitely have tried to, find some data around that. It's just difficult to, just to really find data because, again, really on a lot of like forms and stuff, especially government forms, they don't ask you about your religion. So it is difficult. I think Care National did a poll after the 2018 election, and they said, I think it was like over 90% of Muslims voted, but that just seems insanely high. That seems really high. So I think that definitely Muslims have a lot of room to improve, especially in states where the elections are very close, like Ohio, like Michigan. And so I think Muslims can make the difference. There's an article today in an online publication saying candidates running for president should try to court the Muslim vote. And actually, there's actually a forum at ISNA. They're going to be hosting a presidential forum. And so far, 2 candidates have signed up to attend. So yeah, I do think that people in power and candidates are recognizing that, Muslims can make the difference. So hopefully, as time goes on, more people can vote and, they continue to listen to us. Yep. Oh, this is a question? Right? You're asking me, right? So the question was, which way does the American Muslim lean between Democrat and Republican? Again, we're nonpartisan. We don't take a position. But in terms of the research that I've done on this, American Muslims generally do vote more for Democrat. Although what is interesting is actually before the 2000 election, or actually in the 2000 election, most Muslims actually voted for the Republican. So it sort of goes back and forth. So if you all have any other questions, please come and find me. Again, please go sign up to vote. Please attend the Muslim Advocacy Day on September 17th. It goes from 8:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. You can sign up online at carecolumbus.com. Again, it's important that we show up because that is the only time that they see Muslims. And if we want people to listen to Muslims, we need to go and we need to talk to them. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
لا إله إلا الله. استقيموا إلى الصلاة يرحمكم الله. Straight your lines. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. إنما إلهكم الله الذي لا إله إلا هو وسع كل شيء علما كذلك نقص عليك من أنباء ما قد سبق وقد آتيناك من لدنا ذكرا من أعرض عنه فإنه يحمل يوم القيامة وزرا خالدين فيه وساء لهم يوم القيامة حملا يوم ينفخ في الصور ونحشر المجرمين يومئذ زرقا يتخافتون بينهم إن لبثتم إلا عشرا نحن أعلم بما يقولون إذ يقول أمثلهم طريقة إن لبثتم إلا يوما ويسألونك عن الجبال فقل ينسفها ربي نسفا فيذرها قاعا صفصفا لا ترى فيها عوجا ولا أمتا يومئذ يتبعون الداعي لا عوج له وخشعت الأصوات للرحمن فلا تسمع إلا همسا يومئذ لا تنفع الشفاعة إلا من أذن له الرحمن ورضي له قولا يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون به علما وعنت الوجوه للحي القيوم وعنت الوجوه للحي القيوم وقد خاب من حمل ظلما الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. ومن يعمل من الصالحات وهو مؤمن فلا يخاف ظلما ولا هضما وكذلك أنزلناه قرآنا عربيا وصرفنا فيه من الوعيد لعلهم يتقون أو يحدث لهم ذكرا فتعالى الله الملك الحق ولا تعجل بالقرآن من قبل أن يقضى إليك وحيه وقل رب زدني علما. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله أستغفر الله أستغفر الله أستغفر الله اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. Briefly, inshallah.